A little over a decade ago, Spain were clearly the best national team in the world, due to them winning 3 major international competitions back to back to back. They were untouchable, and with them having some of the best players in the world on their team on top of their beautiful Tiki-Taka style of play, no country was able to get the better of La Roja for years. However, soon after, everything changed, and Spain's national team started to fall apart and their Tiki-Taka style of play died. However, in the past few years, especially in 2024, Spain have regained their dominance in football and have clearly become one of the best national teams in the world again. Not just on the men's side though, but also on the women's side, youth, and club level. So, how did La Roja go from their dominant golden generation period around the early 2010s to then getting humiliated in 3 World Cups in a row, to then changing their style of play and dominating world football once again? Well, let's take a look at the rise, fall, and rise again of Spain's national team. Despite Spain always being a football-loving nation, with the country having the biggest clubs in the world, with Real Madrid and FC Barcelona existing for over a century now, their national team hasn't always been the best. In fact, before Spain's golden era in the 2000s, the only accomplishment La Roja had was winning the Euros back in 1964, with a specific edition being held in the country of Spain as well. However, everything would change for Spain in the late 90s, and it was all because of the Dutch legend Johan Cruyff, who, rest in peace by the way, created the tactical philosophy of Tiki-Taka when he was the Barcelona manager. This style of play is basically all about having possession and fluidity, with each pass having the purpose of getting a shot on goal. But Tiki-Taka only really started to have an effect on the Spain national team when the great Pep Guardiola took over managing Barcelona, with him managing the B team before managing the senior side between the years 2008 and 2012. And it's no coincidence that at the same time when Pep Guardiola took over Barcelona is when Spain had their most successful period in football history. And this is due to the fact that Pep revolutionizing the Tiki-Taka philosophy helped Barcelona become the most dominant force in Europe at the time, with his Barcelona team winning 3 La Liga titles, 2 Copa del Reys, 3 Spanish Super Cups, 2 European Super Cups, 2 Champions Leagues, and 2 Club World Cups. And amongst this was an unprecedented treble of a La Liga title, Champions League trophy, and a Copa del Rey, all being won in the same 2008-09 season. This Barcelona side under Guardiola won 14 trophies in the 4 years he managed the club, showcasing just how dominant this team was. But Pep's philosophy and tactical molding of the players also benefited the Spanish national team at the same time too, as I alluded to earlier. To be honest though, Spain's Tiki-Taka style wasn't fully developed during their Euro 2008 triumph, where the nation had to go past some tough teams like Greece in the group stages, who won the 2004 Euros by the way in the previous edition, Italy, and Germany in the final, beating them 1-0 to win their second ever Euro trophy. But once Pep Guardiola fully got underway at Barcelona and Vincent del Bosque took over the Spain national team is when the Tiki-Taka style of play was truly being displayed by La Roja. During Bosque's time as Spain manager, he wanted to use as many ball playing and ball comfortable players as well, and this included the starting midfield 3, who were all Barcelona players, consisting of Sergio Busquets and more of that 6th role, and then Andres Iniesta and Xavi Hernandez. Even if you look at the depth of Spain's midfield too, they had even more ball-heavy midfielders on the bench, like Xabi Alonso of Real Madrid, David Silva of Man City, and Cesc Fabregas, who didn't always play as a midfielder for Spain at the time due to how many talented midfielders there were, but he was an important player for the national team nevertheless. Anyways, with this selection of players, Spain would dominate their opponents with possession and most of the time win narrowingly but convincingly, and this was put on full display at the 2010 World Cup. During the group stages, Spain's 2 wins against Honduras, which was a 2-0 victory, and against Chile, which was a 2-1 victory, had La Roja dominating possession and the chances as we can see here. And this is a huge reason why Spain even topped their group in the first place. Now before anyone in the comment section mentions this, yes I know, Spain lost to Switzerland in the first game 1-0, but they dominated the possession the most in this game and even had the most chances. They were just unlucky with the finishing on the day. Plus, with Spain losing their first game of the tournament, their calm Tiki-Taka philosophy played a huge part in why they were able to bounce back and top the group in the first place. So if you think about it, this loss just proves my point further. However, Spain's Tiki-Taka style of play becomes even more apparent in the 2010 World Cup knockout stages. Literally every single game ended up being 1-0. Starting off in the round 16, Spain ended up defeating Portugal 1-0 thanks to a second half David Villa goal. And would you look at that, they dominated the possession and the chances. In the quarterfinals against Paraguay, Spain also ended up winning 1-0 thanks to a late goal by David Villa once again. And look, Spain dominated the chances and the possession again. Then in the semifinals against Germany, the same side that the Spanish defeated in the Euro 2008 final, Spain won narrowly again 1-0 thanks to a second half goal from Puyol. And would you look at that, La Roja dominated the possession and the chances again, even though the possession was actually pretty close, let's be honest. But regardless, they beat Germany once again at the end of the day.
Leave us alone! Leave us alone!
And then in the World Cup final against the Netherlands, although the match had to be taken to extra time, Spain actually ended up winning the final 1-0 thanks to a 116-minute goal by Barcelona midfielder Andres Iniesta. And let's look at the stats again. Yeah, Spain dominated the possession and the chances again, with them having 69 63% possession of the ball, and a total of 19 shot attempts with 6 on goal, which is more than the Dutch had all game in either category. So as we can clearly see, Spain's tiki-taka style, and allow Spain to win narrowly each time, was working. And with the Barcelona players already practicing this style week in and week out with their club, and with most of the Barcelona players actually being a good chunk of the Spanish national team at the time, as we can see by the 2010 World Cup roster, all the goal scorers that I literally mentioned in the knockout rounds were Barca players, and there was a total of 7 Barca players out of the 23. Spain were easily able to execute their tiki-taka tactical philosophy to dominate their opponents and win the tournament, just like they did with the 2010 World Cup, Spain's first and only World Cup ever. This same tiki-taka style philosophy was also used by Vincent Del Bosque at the 2012 Euros, even though this time they wouldn't have their key man up top, David Villa, because of injury. But remember how I said earlier that Cesc Fabregas was not used exclusively in the midfield? Yeah, that's because he was practically being used as a false 9 at these Euros, and yet since he was a Barca player, he was used to the tiki-taka style of play, and with that, Spain still dominated these Euros without their usual star man up top. During the group stages, Spain finished on top of the group, and it was thanks to their passing, domination, and resilience against Croatia on the last match day, because eventually, they found their breakthrough thanks to Jesus Navas in the 88th minute, and if it wasn't for him and tiki-taka, Italy would have topped the group and not Spain. Then in the knockout rounds, Spain managed to defeat France 2-0 in the quarterfinals, beat Portugal somewhat luckily in the semifinals on penalties, and then they met up against Italy in the final again. And although they drew 1-1 in the group stages, Spain made no mistake this time, and destroyed the Italians 4-0 in what was one of the most dominating final performances from any team I've ever seen. In fact, they literally had 56.5% possession, and almost half of their shot attempts were shots on target. So as we can see, through Spain's tactical philosophy, they dominated the international stage, winning 2 Euros and 1 World Cup, all in back-to-back-to-back fashion. And they were so close to winning another trophy in 2013, the Confederations Cup. But this tournament was actually the first time that Spain's dominance was shattered, and they were the ones being seen as vulnerable. You see, despite Spain dominating their Confederations Cup group and beating Italy on penalties in the semifinals to make the final, they had to play Brazil, the host nation of the Confederations Cup, since they were hosting the World Cup 1 year later. Now this Brazil team was nowhere near their strongest, and Spain were definitely the overwhelming favorites to take the Confederations Cup home for themselves. But this final was the exact moment when Tiki-Taka got exposed. You see, Tiki-Taka has a weakness, and it was exposed earlier on in the club season when Barcelona played Bayern Munich in the Champions League semifinals. As you all know, Barcelona is the club team that also implements this Tiki-Taka style that Spain uses, since obviously it was created in Barcelona like I mentioned already. So when Bayern Munich absolutely destroyed and stepped all over Barca in the semis, slapping them up 7-0, Brazil's coaching staff decided to use Bayern's same tactics to counter Spain in the Confederations Cup final, and it worked. What Brazil did is just like Bayern Munich. They maintained a high tempo throughout the entire game, including a high press, and this didn't allow Spain too much time on the ball. And if Spain doesn't have time on the ball, they can't execute their tiki-taka style tactics. Not only that, Brazil's midfield congested the middle of the pitch heavily, making sure the Spanish midfielders didn't have the possession to dictate the play of the match as well. Instead, Brazil forced Spain out wide, which meant that Spain's best choice of attack turned to crossing, which was not one of their strong suits. Plus, with this high tempo Brazil played with, La Roja became vulnerable to counterattacks, and Brazil's second and third goal was because of Brazil's counterattacking play. Plus, when you mix in the fact that Brazil had the home advantage, and they had an absolute X-factor of a player in a young Neymar Jr., who just defies the laws of tactics since he was that talented and good of a player, Brazil left Spain in shambles and won the Confederations Cup 3-0, snapping Spain's 29 competitive game undefeated streak at the same time as well. And this, for me and many others, was the start of Spain's downfall period. Now before we go on to the next part of the video, please remember to subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it and it means a lot, so thank you. And also if you guys can, follow my Twitter and my Instagram, both at Nabuto, if you just want to hear my thoughts on football games, transfers, and overall, just to get to know me more. So if you want to, feel free to hit me up with that follow. Thank you. Back to topic, as Spain were heading into the 2014 World Cup as defending champions, Vincent Del Bosque, the Spain manager that's been around since 2008, came out and said that the national team has to evolve and become more direct, and that they couldn't only rely on tiki-taka football. But when you're still relying on national team players that have played under this tiki-taka philosophy for years, it's kind of hard to reteach something else to them, especially when they're much older and aren't as young and flexible anymore to learn a new style of play and tactics. And this remaining possession style approach that Spain had was one of the main reasons that caused their downfall at the 2014 World Cup and the following tournaments that we'll get to real soon. But back to 2014, despite Del Bosque bringing in the Brazilian-born direct striker Diego Costa into the team for the tournament, nothing really went to plan for the Spanish. In fact, it went the worst it possibly could have. Despite La Roja getting a 1-0 lead in their World Cup 2010 final rematch against the Netherlands, the Dutch absolutely destroyed them 5-1, with an absolute worldie by Robin van Persie that everyone still remembers today, and then just more humiliating goals that followed in the second half. And want to know what makes this loss even more infuriating for the Spanish? Spain still had most of the possession even though they got slapped silly.
This is football heritage.
Anyways, Chile played someone like Brazil in the next group stage game against Spain, but instead of trying to dominate and playing high tempo, they sat back more and pounced on the counterattack and set pieces. And due to these tactics, Chile ended up winning the game 2-0, meaning Spain got knocked out of the World Cup in the group stages despite being the recent champions. Now the 2018 World Cup went slightly better for the Spanish, but not by much, with a new appointment of Fernando Hierro taking over right before the tournament from Julian Lopetegui, two managers by the way who also said that Spain had to adapt to the times and play more direct football, but that's besides the point. Spain actually managed to make it out of the group stages this time. Not only that, they did so by topping a difficult group containing the likes of Portugal, Iran, and Morocco. But with Spain still relying on some old heads that were used to the Tiki-Taka style, like Sergio Busquets, Andres Iniesta, Sergio Ramos, Gerard Piqué, David Silva, etc., they got exposed once again in the round of 16, but in a more embarrassing fashion. In the round of 16 tie against Russia, the host nation of the World Cup, Spain had an astonishing 74% possession of the ball, and they had a total of 25 shot attempts with none of them being on target, compared to Russia, who had only one shot on goal with 6 shot attempts. But even with one shot on target compared to 9, both teams only scored 1 goal, and this meant that the game had to be sent to penalties, which is exactly what Russia wanted, since they allowed Spain to keep possession, and they just sat back and hoped that they could make it to penalties. Like seriously, those were Russia's tactics, and it's hard to judge them for it. They were playing Spain, bro, and even then, it worked. The reason for that is Russia made all 4 of their penalties, while Koke and later Iago Aspas missed theirs, meaning that the host nation pulled off the ultimate upset and beat Spain in the round 16 of the World Cup and sent those boys packing home. Now you would think that Spain have learned their lesson by now, to move to a more direct approach and abandon most of the Tiki-Taka philosophy, especially when Luis Enrique, another treble-winning coach of Barcelona back in the 2014-15 season, took over the national team before the 2022 World Cup. And he himself also agreed that Spain needed to evolve from their old tactical philosophies and inject some pace and directness into the attack. But nope, Spain were still stuck in their ways, and there were 2 games that Spain lost at the World Cup that they shouldn't have on paper. And the first one was the match against Japan on match day 3 of the group stages. In this game, Spain even took an early lead in the 11th minute thanks to Alvaro Morata, but even with the lead, Spain weren't able to control the match like they used to and fell apart. And thanks to Ritsu Doan hitting an absolute rocket at the start of the second half in the 48th minute to bring the game back level, and then Kaoru Mitoma and Ao Tanaka combining in the most anime clutch-like goal possible, Japan got a 2-1 lead and kept this lead for the remaining minutes of the match, securing the victory and topping the group over Spain, who ended up finishing in second. What makes this even worse for Spain though is in the match, they had 82.3% possession. That means they had a large, very large majority of the ball, and they still lost. Plus, with them having most of the chances with 12 shot attempts and 5 on target, it becomes even more embarrassing for Spain that they even lost this match. But luckily for Spain, as it initially seemed, luck might have been on their side, because in the other group, Morocco surprisingly topped it, while Croatia finished in second. So Spain avoided the better team on paper in Croatia and had to play Morocco, their neighbors on the map in the round of 16. In this game, Spain had 76.8% possession and over 1,000 passes in the game against Morocco, clearly displaying to football fans that they were still relying on this Tiki-Taka style of play all these years later, despite them being exposed for it on multiple occasions. And with Morocco sitting back and defending their net like their lives depended on it, Spain only managed to conjure up 13 shot attempts but only 1 on target after 120 minutes, thus sending the game to a penalty shootout. And this is where Spain truly crumbled the most, because La Roja only took 3 penalties, but all 3 penalty takers, including the most experienced one and Sergio Busquets, missed, meaning that once again, Spain had lost to an inferior opponent on paper in the World Cup round 16 yet again, losing to Morocco this time on pens. It felt like Spain were just keeping possession and passing the ball just for their own sake and comfortability. It was almost like they knew nothing else, and this was the only tactic that they knew how to execute as a team, even when it wasn't working.
Boring.
And with the Spanish Federation realizing this, Luis Rubiales expressed a necessity of needing a new project after the 2022 World Cup elimination. And that's when he hired Luis de la Fuente, the old Spain under-18, under-19, and under-21 manager, to coach the senior team instead. Bro, how many Luises are involved in this situation? What the hell? Anyways, although nobody paid too much attention to this manager hiring at the time, this move by the Spanish FA started the domino effect that changed the fate of the Spain national team for the better. Now, the hiring of Luis de la Fuente to coach the Spain senior national team was interesting and maybe even a little underwhelming at the time. That's because although he did pretty well at the youth levels for Spain, he didn't have too much senior coaching experience. He only coached at Portugalete in the regional leagues of Spain, and then Aurora de Vitoria, a second division Spanish side at the time, for only a few months, coached Athletic Bilbao's youth and reserves, and then Alaves' senior side back in 2011 before being sacked within 3 months. So as you can see, his resume wasn't great, and it's not like the fans were immediately backing Luis de la Fuente too at the start either, because Ruiz, his first couple of games for coaching Spain didn't go so well. In fact, in literally his second game in charge, he lost a European qualifier against Scotland 2-0. And you already know that the headlines back home weren't taking this too well. But despite the controversies and backlash Luis de la Fuente received on and off the pitch, he stuck to his guns, and eventually it paid off, with him developing a pragmatic style tactically for the Spain national team that basically abandoned their old Tiki-Taka play. Spain started to see success, and eventually in the 2022/23 Nations League finals, Spain ended up winning their first trophy since the 2012 Euros after defeating Italy in the semi-finals and then Croatia in the final on penalties. And this definitely showed the start of something new for La Roja. Now I can't credit Luis de la Fuente for everything regarding this change. He came at a perfect time, where Spain's old guard was finally all gone, like Busquets, Xavi, Iniesta, Piqué, Sergio Ramos, Fabregas, etc. all retired from international football, if not football altogether. And that's when recently, at around the same time as Luis de la Fuente's hire, the new generation started to trickle in. And this new gen of Spanish players weren't molded with the Tiki-Taka style of play. Even the Barcelona products were also moving away from the Tiki-Taka style. Basically though, Luis de la Fuente got blessed for his players. And for example, two of them were pacey, skillful, and direct wingers. And their names are Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal. And despite both of them being very young, like literally Lamine Yamal was 16 years old for a majority of the 2024 Euros, both of them are very good players and enjoyed amazing 2023-24 campaigns at their respective clubs, with Lamine Yamal cooking at Barcelona and Nico Williams cooking at Athletic Bilbao. Additionally, these two were exactly the fresh air that Spain needed to compete on the highest level again. Both of those wingers together played great throughout the entire Euros, and that's why those two and many other great players on the team like Cucurella, Rodri, Fabian Ruiz, etc. were key pieces in Spain's Euro 2024 triumph, despite them adapting a completely new style of tactics. For example, in their opening game against Croatia at the Euros, they absolutely demolished the Croatians 3-0, but for the first time in 16 years, Spain's run of having more possession than their opponents, which lasted for 136 games, finally ended, with Croatia actually ending the game on more possession than the Spanish, despite losing the game 3-0. And even though both of the teams had the same number of shots on target, which is something Spain's golden era didn't do, since they usually dominated more of the chances in the game, Spain were more ruthless and clinical in front of goal obviously, which is why they still won the match 3-0. So if anyone couldn't see this statistic as a sign of things changing for the better for Spain, then y'all must be blind or something, I don't know. Then in the next game against Italy, Spain did dominate the possession, but more importantly, they were directly going at goal, and with 20 shot attempts, they got 9 on target and only limited Italy to 1. Eventually, they got the breakthrough due to a Calafiori own goal and secured all 3 points. And then, even though they played the bench against Albania on match day 3, they still came away with the 1-0 victory and became the only national team at the Euros to come away with 9 points in the group stages. Spain only then went on and cooked even harder in the knockout stages of the tournament. Even though they conceded first to Georgia in the round of 16, the first time they conceded all tournament, Spain still came away with a 4-1 victory after scoring 4 very direct and non-Tiki-Taka style like goals. Then in the quarterfinals, Spain had a rematch with Germany, someone who they beat in the Euro 2008 final and the World Cup 2010 final. And once again, even though Spain scored first and Germany equalized in the 89th minute through Florian Wirtz, Spain somehow found a way to win against their toughest opponent across the entire Euros, to be honest. And it was thanks to a 119th minute header from Mikel Merino that sealed the game for La Roja 2-1. Germany losing to Spain in a competitive game, this is nothing new.
Oh, that was uncalled for.
In the semifinals now, Spain had to play tough opponents France, who although have played pretty poorly throughout the Euros, they were still the 2018 World Cup champions and the 2022 World Cup finalists. But even though France scored first, 2 very direct players that Spain have, Lamine Yamal and Dani Olmo, came through for the Spanish, and they scored a goal each to secure a 2-1 win against the French to make the final of the Euros, where they would then have to play England. And early on in the second half, the 2 direct, pacey, and very attacking wingers, Lamine Yamal and Nico Williams, combined to put La Roja up 1-0. This type of goal is something that you wouldn't have seen from Spain 10 to 15 years ago, but in 2024, this is the norm. And then, even though England equalized through Cole Palmer, Mikel Oyarzabal got on the end of a Cucurella cross in the 86th minute and put Spain up late to eventually secure the 2-1 win and secure the country's 4th ever Euros trophy, which now also meant that Spain had become the most successful team in Euros history and probably the best national team overall in the 21st century so far. And the reason Spain were able to accomplish this feat is because of their Tiki-Taka golden era, but also being able to adapt, even though very late, but adapt nevertheless, into a more modern, direct, attacking, beautiful football that led them to win the 2024 Euros and become very big favorites for the 2026 World Cup. But other than the Spain golden era, where only the men's senior team was dominant, the times have changed for La Roja, and they're dominating everywhere, including the youth side, the women's side, and the club side of the game. Starting off with Spain's youth team on the men's side, they've enjoyed some recent success to establish more Spanish dominance in the world's game. At the Under-19 Euros, Spain were in a somewhat tricky group containing France, Turkey, and Denmark, and since they drew 2 of the matches, they finished 2nd place and had to play Italy in the semifinals. However, just like back at the 2012 Euros final and the 2023 Nations League semifinal, Spain's Under-19 side owned Italy's Under-19 side, and Paul Fortuny scored a 100th minute goal to secure Spain a 1-0 victory. This then led Spain to face the ever so scary France in the final, a side they drew 2-2 in the group stages. But remember, Spain have got that dog in them, and thanks to a 41st minute goal from Iker Bravo and then an own goal from Jaquet in the 68th minute, Spain's under-19 team ended up beating France's under-19 team 2-0 in the final, meaning that they won the under-19 European Championship. But that's not all. Let's move on to the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris. Admittedly, Spain pulled up with one of the strongest squads at the tournament, with players like Juan Miranda, Eric Garcia, Pau Cubarsí, Fermin Lopez, etc. being selected to represent the country at the Olympics. But having a strong squad at this under-23 tournament isn't a guarantee that you'll win the gold medal. Look at the 2020 Olympic squad for Spain. That side had Unai Simon, Marco Correa, Pau Torres, Martin Zubamendi, Asensio, Mikel Merino, Dani Ceballos, Mikel Oyarzabal, Carlos Soler, Pedri, Dani Olmo, Bryan Gil, etc. They were stacked back in 2020, or 2021 rather, and they still couldn't take home the gold. So Spain's under-23 squad for the 2024 Olympics had a huge challenge ahead of them, and the group stages were actually really challenging for Spain, because although they beat the likes of Dominican Republic 3-1 and then Uzbekistan 2-1, they lost to Egypt 2-1, and this meant that Spain finished second in their group despite being the best on paper within the 4 teams. And this also meant that Spain had to play Japan in the quarterfinals, but Spain will finally decide to lock in at the Olympics, and they breezed by Japan's under-23 side 3-0 in the quarterfinals. Then they had to play Morocco in the semifinals, and I'm sure the Spain players had the World Cup 2022 round 16 defeat playing in their heads over and over again, only thinking about revenge. And they got it. Despite Morocco bringing in good players like Abdi from Real Betis and Hakimi from PSG, Spain got past them 2-1. That meant that there was only one game left that separated La Roja's under-23 side from winning the gold medal, but it was against the host France in the final. And even though Spain went down 1-0 in the game, Fermin Lopez, the La Masia product and Barcelona player, came up clutch for his country and scored 2 goals, bringing his total Olympics goal tally to 6 to give Spain the lead. And eventually, they got one more to lead the match 3-1. However, France got 2 late goals and the game had to be sent to extra time. But thanks to Sergio Camello Perez scoring 2 goals in extra time, Spain defeated France 5-3 in the Olympics football final in Paris to secure that beautiful Olympics gold medal. Spain beat France in the final of the under-19 Euros and the under-23 Olympics. You just know that France are pissed right now. But it's not just the men that are dominating on the youth level, it's the women too. Now I'm not going to go over the itty bitty details because then we'll be here forever. I know y'all don't want that, but the Spanish youth women are dominating everything. They're the reigning champions in the under-17 Euros, the under-19 Euros, the under-17 World Cup, and the under-20 World Cup. They literally won everything they can, bruh. These Spanish youth women are cooking. But not only that, the Spain women's team is also cooking on the senior level. They ended up winning the Nations League and are the recent champions. But not only that, in the Women's World Cup, a tournament notoriously dominated by the United States women's team, Spain's women's side actually beat Sweden in the semifinals, who are a very good side, and then beat England in the final to win their very first Women's World Cup. An extraordinary achievement that women and citizens of Spain should all be proud of. But basically, no matter what age group or what level it is, Spain's women's side is dominating. And even on the club side too, Spain have been dominating as well. Not as much on the international stage though, since it's only Real Madrid, but in the last 11 Champions League campaigns, Real Madrid alone have won 6 Champions League titles. And if you add Barcelona's 2015 triumph, Spain have won 7 out of the last 11, meaning 63.63% of the recent Champions League winners have been from Spain. Absolutely extraordinary. And with Real Madrid not planning to stop with this domination, since after all, they just signed Kylian Mbappe on a free to their already insanely stacked squad, and also Endrick, a future Brazilian superstar, and with Barcelona looking like they're finally going to stop being booty cheeks and being a serious threat, with La Masia products coming through looking scary good, like Lamine Yamal, it seems like La Liga might become the main focus of football leagues again, and potentially are ready to dominate the Champions League even more. And also on the women's side, I think we all know this by now, but Barcelona's women's team is crazy good too. But overall, back to the grand scheme of things, when I first started getting into football and playing the sport, all my past coaches used to say something similar. I want us to play like Spain. And everybody knew at that time that Spain was the best national team in the world. That's what I grew up on. So to see Spain's downfall for the latter part of the 2010s was honestly kind of disheartening to see. And to see that tactical style that I and many others fell in love with, needing to be abandoned and changed was something definitely hard to get over. But now, with Spain coming back and dominating football on literally every level again, I find some peace in that in all honesty. And it's definitely nice to see a side who loves playing beautiful football come back to the top again. But anyways, that is how Spain have dominated football once again. If you guys enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. And please be sure to follow my Twitter and my Instagram. The links are in my YouTube description. And last but not least, if you want to know who I think will win the Premier League in this upcoming season, who will get top 4, and who will get relegated, you definitely want to check out this video right here. You won't regret it.